the thing that I want to share with you guys today is sort of a case study about how we rolled out CRM as a discipline at Kimberly-Clark. So a lot of people are actually in the weeds doing CRM, and that's where a lot of the fun happens, right? And I had done that for about 20 years, and then I joined Kimberly-Clark, and I really wasn't sure what I was in for. I really didn't know that much about CPG, to be honest with you. But the idea of working on a global scale was something that was really interesting and intriguing to me. So what I'd like to share with you is a little bit about how we did that. Hopefully there's some lessons learned. And also just land the point that kind of keeps coming up, which is test, learn, repeat. Like we did that insistently with everything that we did. You know, test 2 or 3 times before we would roll anything out. So that's definitely a common theme that I would like to kind of land with our time together. Big green button. Oh, that one. The one with the arrow. Okay. So a little bit about me. Again, my name is Rebecca Herwitt, and I'm the CRM lead for Kimberly-Clark globally. If you don't know much about Kimberly-Clark, we're a consumer packaged goods. We're not nearly as big as P&G or Unilever, but we're mighty, right? So we've been in the market for about 150 years. Started out as a paper company, and then started turning that paper into actual innovative products. And in some cases, you'll see across the bottom here, Huggies, Cottonelle, Kleenex. Some of those are like, you know, household names like Kleenex you can't get away from, right? It's like Xerox. Also Kotex, and those are just a few, right? In North America alone, we have 10 brands, and if we go global, that becomes much more complicated. In some cases, you'll have the same brand with a different name. Sometimes it's a completely different product with the same name. So it becomes very complicated as you try to think about how are you going to do this in a consistent, clear, consumer-centric way. So that's a little bit about, and the other thing I was going to tell you is that I've been with Casey for 10 years, and to be perfectly honest with you, I'm as surprised as you are. I can tell by the looks on your faces this morning. But the reasons that I have stayed and stuck with it is because there's 2 things. One, I love a challenge, and going global was a huge challenge, right? Just trying to think about how I could take the things that I knew about the discipline and cascade that around the globe and make it stick was a really interesting idea to me. The second thing is I love the world, learning about the world and learning from our marketers all around the globe and trying to solve even the same problem, sell Huggies, for example, in Brazil versus the Ukraine. And like learning about all these different marketers and what their particular challenges are, and it's always a little bit different. And sometimes it's data, sometimes it's technology. So my role really kind of turned into kind of a jack of all, I wouldn't say jack of all trades, like a subject matter expert / like internal consultant. All right, so that's been really fun. Big green button. How do you go back? There we go. Very sensitive. So when we started out, we really kind of had to centralize. We had a lot of conversations, but we really had to think about what are we trying to do here? You know, there's a lot that you can do with CRM. I find it to be a very powerful and impactful discipline. So we really had to kind of center ourselves on one. I guess somebody mentioned North Star this morning. But we really wanted to set out to create a global, consumer-centric CRM practice. And we wanted to do that in a way that was scalable, adaptable, and cost-effective to drive incremental business growth. So that may seem obvious to a lot of us here, but when you talk about consumer packaged good marketers around the globe, the idea of consumer centricity is almost foreign, or at least it was. They think about and make brilliant products. They talk about brilliant products. They do not do a very good job of talking to consumers about brilliant products, right? So they would just lead with, hey, I've got a great product, and they bang everybody on the head with it, right? So this idea of trying to shift that thinking and get them to start thinking about what is the life, you know, think about Huggies. We'll talk a lot about Huggies today because it's easy, theoretically. But the idea is that, I lost my train of thought there, consumer centricity. So the moms, you know, that's who's buying Huggies, moms and dads, right? And usually we focus a lot on new moms, right? Experienced moms already kind of have their choices made. They know what they're doing. You know, baby number 2, somebody mentioned to me, you know, not as precious. They're like, yep, still breathing. I think that was you from the other night. But the idea of getting the marketers to lift their heads up and start thinking about what is, you know, a new mom's experience really like. Like, what are they actually doing? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? When do you actually talk to them about Huggies? It's certainly not when they're pregnant. They just got pregnant. They're like, woohoo, I'm so excited. And you're like, here, buy some Huggies. It doesn't work, right? But they were doing that. I'm not kidding you, totally doing that. So this idea of consumer centricity, we really needed to land. And the idea of incremental business growth, it's the only way we were going to get it to spread. So those are really two key things. It's complex, though. And this was something we talked an awful lot about, too. And there's more complexities than, of course, that are on here. But these are a few. When we sat down to talk about this, there's over 150 countries. That's a lot. 7,000 languages. I was like, what the heck? How are we going to handle that? Like, I have no idea. And we started this basically 8 years ago, too. So things are coming along. And you heard from Salesforce today. There's a lot of things moving very quickly. So translations are even easier now than they were then, but it's still difficult. Religious and cultural diversity, we'll just leave it at that. There's a lot going on in the world today. This idea of digital penetration and infrastructure is really an interesting one. So I'll just tell you right now, the big reveal, we're on Salesforce. Nice presentation this morning. But the idea of this idea of like thinking that you can use one tool to manage all these different opportunities and all these different challenges was daunting. But one of the things I'll just tell you that was sort of surprising to me was this idea of you just expect digital penetration is going to be pretty ubiquitous by now, right? And infrastructure is going to be there. I'll give you one example. We went to Saudi Arabia recently. Incredibly rich country. Not hard to necessarily sell things and get people to buy things, but communicating with them was almost impossible. Like, this seems crazy, right? But email doesn't work. They just don't respond. They just don't. So we moved to SMS. SMS, the infrastructure isn't there. It's really patchy, right? So we couldn't get a consistent set of communications out. And then we moved to WhatsApp, and that we're having more success with. But it's like you have to be able to adjust to all those sorts of nuances, and you don't know that until you go into the market, right? Media consumption habits also, I think, can go, everybody uses and consumes media differently, but then you add the Kimberly-Clark factor, right? We as an organization are very decentralized, right? We put a lot of responsibility in our local markets. They own the business, they have to drive the business, they have to meet their numbers. We're there to support them from a global standpoint, right? And then we cut up the world into 4 regions, each that are very distinct and operate differently. So there's APAC, EMEA, Latin America, my favorite. They're so easy to work with. And then of course North America. And then, like I said, there's plus or minus 10 brands in each of those, and they vary, market to market. So like in North America, we have Cottonelle, toilet paper, big winner for us during COVID. And then you go to the UK, Andrex, endorsed by the Queen. Totally different, right? Same product generally, but a little different. So a lot of complexity. So when we started to think about this, and we start trying to develop what we call a capability, right? CRM as a discipline, you can call it lots of things, but we were thinking about it from how do we actually enable all these markets to get up on CRM and do it well? So we try to look at this generally through 3 lenses: people, process, and technology to start. So first, we went out and we did an audit, right? We started talking to everybody to see what, how they were doing CRM, was it working? What tools were they using? Are they happy? What do they think about it? And what we found is from a people standpoint, it varied widely. A lot of people kind of excited about it, but others completely thought it was crap. They couldn't see any value in it at all. Some places we had, a fraction of a FTE for the entire region. Other places we had 2 or 3 people. It really just depended. And then the abilities within those folks varied as well. So it's some were really smart and with it and really been digging in. Others were just kind of doing it as a side job. So just within people, a lot of complexity. When you go to process, everybody was getting their emails into market in a very different way. Some had agencies to do their creative. Some were doing the creative at their desk. Some people were collecting data in a database. Some were collecting it at their desk. There was a lot of things that we could quickly see that we could just streamline. And if we could just get them to understand, how dangerous some of that is, that we could actually get them to move faster and better. Technology is also, we had one of everything, right? We had Marketo in one place. We had Adobe in another place. In some markets, we actually had 2 different brands active in CRM, and each one of them had their own platform. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense at all, right? But how do we make sense of it? We just had to understand. And then, of course, because it's CRM, we really had to look at it through the data lens. And data is, of course, the foundation of everything that we do, and that varies greatly. So in some markets, they had databases of a couple 100,000. I'm like, that's a good place to start. We can work with that. Other places, 2,000. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with that. I mean, it's nice. It's cute. But in other places, you can get second-party data, third-party data to kind of shore up those profiles. In some places, you can't get any of that. So it's just something we had to really kind of zero in on and really think about how are we going to handle this strategically, right? So there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but we needed to think about it kind of as our starting point to see where we wanted to go. Like if this is our ambition, how are we going to get there with this as a starting point? So we started thinking about what's the change. So I'm just going to kind of go through this a little bit in a little bit more detail. But when you think about people, what we consistently heard was CRM is expensive. I was like, I don't know about email being expensive. Like, that's not something I think. That's not the first thing that comes to my mind. But they thought it was. We also thought it was very hard to do. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be, right? What we wanted them to start thinking about is it's a value driver. Like, never mind that other stuff. It's really about how is it going to impact your business, right? And we all know inherently that developing one-to-one relationships with consumers is going to drive value, right? I don't know that I've ever seen CRM not work. You know, I mean, it's pretty consistent. It's been around for a long time. And then product-centric, as I mentioned, I kind of beat that one, beat a little bit of a dead horse there, but we really wanted them to start thinking, shift the hat all the way around and start thinking about their consumers first. You know, when you're developing the product, they do think about the consumers there, and they do a lot of research and stuff like that, but they weren't applying that same rigor to their outbound communications. So we really wanted to get them to think about that differently. And then this idea of tactical versus strategic. Some people were just shooting them out when they wanted them. You know, they're like, I've got a new product. You know, pew, 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 pew. I'm just going to send it to everybody in the database, right? And some, maybe not in the database. I'm going to tell everybody. But we really wanted to start thinking again, what are the moments that matter to our consumers, and how do I engage them in that time frame in a meaningful way and provide them the right information to make their lives better, right? That's really what we're trying to do. So we needed to get them to stop thinking so tactical. And as I mentioned, a lot of them were doing CRM in very different ways. Simple setting up of an email. Everybody was doing it in their own way. They were, personalizing in their own ways if they were actually, getting to personalization. They were using different tools, as I mentioned. Sometimes they were even representing the brand Huggies differently. So like in Australia, they had one logo. North America, they had another logo. And then in Latin America and Argentina, they had a blue logo. And I was like, I don't even know what's going on here, right? So it's like a lot to figure out there. But we thought if we can bring in some of these we can centralize certain things and make it more consistent, then we can kind of offer it a little bit more as a service, right? Kind of like, here's what you need to do to get started. You need to start like this, put your data in this bucket, structure it like this, use this tool, right? These sorts of things, so that they don't even have to really think about that, right? They don't have to say, is Adobe better than Salesforce or Marketo or YesMail or whatever it is, right? So that was one thing that we wanted to do from a technology standpoint. We also wanted to get them out of the manual space. A lot of them were sitting there on Tuesdays hitting go, right? Tuesday, 8 a.m., We really wanted to say, you don't have to do that. You're a marketer. You should be watching the business. We want you to just automate as much as you can. So that was another big thing that we wanted to change. And then they were also creating these things everywhere. So they were creating a Huggies campaign in every market around the globe, right? It's our biggest brand. And we were like, that doesn't make any sense, right? You're wasting a lot of money on creative and assets and development times, and there's a lot of room for error. Like, we can streamline that and build it once, and then just do it in a way that's flexible, right? So you can get your local market needs met, but you can do it once and then scale it, right? And just for the record, I'm making some of this stuff sound really easy, and it's really a lot harder than it sounds. But the concept was there. And then from a technology standpoint, we talked about this, lots of tech stacks. We really wanted one flexible, tech stack that could meet a lot of different needs around the globe. And then we also had a lot of people collecting data in their own way. Like I said, I joke about the spreadsheets, but it was sometimes. Or they would come back from an event with, stacks of paper. And we really wanted them to say, okay, we need to do this in a more automated fashion. Maybe we can use tablets, iPads, structure the incoming data, and then put that into one flexible data schema, right? So that we could all understand what's happening in the databases, and you could compare and contrast them, right? You can understand which ones are growing better, faster, stronger, more engaged, those sorts of things. So those were some of the things that we really wanted to, at the end of the day, if we were going to say what good looks like, it's on the right? Not perfect, but better. That's the change. So we started thinking about what's the solution. And the solution is kind of, we knew we wanted to honor who Kimberly-Clark is, right? Our markets are fast moving. They're really smart. They know what they need to do. So we need to be able to enable them to do that. But we also wanted to find these efficiencies, right? So we basically labeled that globally efficient, locally effective, right? And so the things on the right-hand side are things we figured we could centralize and do more, faster, better, right? First thing's a tech stack. We landed on Salesforce Marketing Cloud. We needed a global footprint. We needed a roadmap where we could build and add, and some of the things that the Salesforce, and I've forgotten your name, I'm sorry, that you mentioned here about adding on different capabilities. That was something we were really interested in. We could actually build it step by step. And then data schema, centralizing that was a big one. We already talked about that. Email templates was a huge aha moment for everybody. And I was like, that's crazy. Let's just build one template, make it modular, and then, So that was one thing we figured we could do better, faster, stronger. The execution process, we tried to streamline that too. I think we found, in general, we could make a strong suggestion and control certain parts of it. And then there was going to be some flexibility that needed to be had, right? That one wasn't quite as easy to just say, just do this. Reporting, something we continue to work on. So we had originally been doing manual reporting in the first markets, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But once we stabilize the reporting, the idea now is that we can centralize it in a measurement platform, right? So it's another thing where we can actually compare and contrast. We can see what other folks are doing. It kind of makes the results available to all. And then the last thing, and probably one of the things I spend a lot of time on, is best practices. Excuse me. Again, they were just doing some things that were just, would be obvious to you or I. And it's just just don't do that. Your call to action. I'm just going to tell you this one. When I started in Australia, right, and one of the reasons we started in Australia is because they showed me they said, we've had this program for about 10 years, and the response rates are tanking. And this was all before even the open stuff, the trouble with the open rates, and that we were still looking at open rates and engagement rates at that time, and click-throughs, I'm sorry. But they showed me one of their emails, and I was like, I can fix this. They didn't have a call to action. I kid you not. They were still sending out an entire article, and there was no call to action. And I was like, you know what? I think we can handle this. But it's that's just basic best practices, right? So it's just it can be that basic. In other cases, we had more sophisticated ones, and they just needed help refining, right? But on the local side, we really wanted them to own strategy. They know their brands, they know their culture, they know their market. We wanted them to develop the creative assets that were most relevant, right? So whether it be imagery, cultural references, timing, all those things can change and be different. This is, again, not as easy as it sounds, but the test and learn plans, they don't really like to do that. But we really wanted to work hard with them to try to have them own it. I taught them how to, right? But it was more of a teach them how to fish kind of thing, because they need to stay on top of that, right? They have to keep learning and growing. And then optimizations and specifically compliance. The easy one is if you go to EMEA, everything is guided by GDPR, and you have to do everything slightly differently. And I think somebody else said this, you kind of build for the most extreme case, and then kind of get everybody else to fall in line. That's generally what we were trying to do, but it's kind of settled out over time. So this was kind of the basic, solutioning. We're thinking about how can we be more efficient from a global standpoint, what can we bring to the table from the center, right? And then how can we enable them to do their jobs better and meet their goals? So this idea was how are we going to do this, right? Again, looking at the globe, it's kind of daunting, So with the team, we started thinking about it, and we could, we looked at a number of different, we'd already audited all the markets, right? So we knew what we were dealing with, and then we're could we group them together, ones like this, and do something with them, and then maybe group these ones like that, or what have you, or maybe we start here and then go there, how do we do this and do this most effectively? So what we really landed on was this land and expand mentality, and the idea is if we could do it right once in one place, test everything out, like the technology, the process, all those sorts of things, and do that test and learn cycle, we could then spread out faster, right, in a thoughtful way. So it was a little bit of a combination of, we didn't want to go so systematically, like from here to here to here to here. We wanted to actually get exponentially better, right, and faster. So that was our basic approach. So I'm just going to share a little bit about how we did that. And so as I mentioned, the landing part was we started in Australia. Australia had a really, it was cool for a lot of reasons. It's Australia. But they had a strong Huggies brand. And we started with Huggies. I'm sorry, I'm just going to say that right out the box. We could have started in other places, but Huggies was our biggest brand, and the most, it lends itself most to engagement with moms and dads, you know, and there's a lot of learning opportunities, there's a lot of engagement you can do. So we started in Australia, and Australia had, believe it or not, such a strong website for Huggies that it was rated number 1 or 2 for expecting moms in Australia, consistently for years. And we were like, well, that is a damn good reason to go to Australia. There's a lot of good content. They've done a lot of thinking about this, so that was one big thing. They also, as I mentioned, had been doing CRM for about 10 years. Whether they were doing it great, but they were at this point and they were going down. And there was all email all the time. And like I said, they had, I think they were on Marketo at the time. Great platform. And then, I feel like I can't be disparaging. And I don't mean to be, but it was really good, and they had a really good partnership in place, but it's expensive, right? So the idea of us coming in and working with them was to say, how can we do this a little bit with as much care and bring as much value as your local agency and your local team does, but do it faster, smarter, you know, and less costly. So the first thing we did is we landed on a singular kind of call to action to build a database, right? So with Huggies, because moms usually engage for about 2 or 3 years, or parents even, you know, but usually we're talking to moms. And so there's always people migrating out of the database, just as people are coming in the database, right? It's like a leaky bucket. So we landed on the strongest call to action we could come up with, and that was, you know, basically join now for a chance to win a year's worth of diapers. And that was working. So we just started using that consistently everywhere, right? And then collecting all the data in a centralized database in Salesforce. And then we built out one tactical journey, but we did it, you know, with as much flexibility as we can. So we really tried to keep, it was a bit linear, I would say. You know, it's like week 1, mom's excited, she's found out she's pregnant. Week 2, you know, she tells her husband. Week 3, you know, like whatever it might be, but it's kind of consistent, right? But there are points at which, especially when the baby's born, that you want to start to flex and move with, like whether it's a boy or a girl, or a, you know, are they newborn? Are they getting active? Are they starting to move? Like all those sorts of things you have to start to pay more attention to. But so we started this whole journey. There's probably about 60 or 80 emails that we built out in chunks, right? And we were testing them as we went. And then we landed on a pretty strong, you know, after about 6-8 months. And we stood up a template, you can see there. Probably, and it's been evolved probably 2 times since then, but this is the old one. But like literally just cutting up the content into snacks, right? Instead of sending them a whole entire article and putting in all the call to action. Like literally they were like, woohoo, 50% increase right away. And I was like, I'm pretty cool, you know, I'm good at this. But it was really just like a great, they had the appetite also. So the team was really invested and it was great. So we then landed on one process, right? We also figured out who would be our implementation partner to help us stand everything up in Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And we found, we kind of patented what the process would be. We pressure tested it. And then as I mentioned, we started out with some basic reporting that we were doing manually. But once we kind of landed on these are the right metrics, they're consistent, the data's coming in, all those sorts of things, we have then since turned it into automated and done it all around the globe. So the idea of like testing all these things once and then making like, and going back and tweaking, right? That test, learn, repeat, like that sort of thing is really started at the very beginning. And we've seen it actually be a great benefit. So once we landed Australia and everybody was happy and we had a really great story to tell, right? We could also track some level of sales there too. It's very difficult in CPG. We then started to look to other markets. And again, if we think about Huggies, again, similar, you think it's going to be the same everywhere you go. I'm really was surprised at how much it kind of isn't and how kind of interesting that is. So we next went to Argentina, very different market, strong market in LAO, but they took the exact same assets, same journey, same everything. We figured out the challenges around translation. We had to do some level of combination between automated and then having somebody in the local market check it and smooth it out. So we had to kind of figure that part of it out. We also realized that moms don't really engage that much like we do. In the North America, just if you think about it, we just suck up information and we start as soon as we know something, right? We're like I said, you get pregnant, you're excited, then you start to tell people, and then you start grabbing all the information you can to learn, right? In Argentina, they wait a little bit longer, right? They don't really start scouring things until about 6 months. And I never really kind of got underneath why that was exactly, but it was just the way that they behaved. And so we shortened the journey. We started here, right? And we had to kind of tweak a little bit. But then we continued, because now it's like Australia is a big market. Argentina was kind of a mid-sized market. Test, learn, repeat, right? And then we went to, believe it or not, Korea. Completely different, right? And I'm not even sure quite what happened there, to be honest with you, but we did a wonderful journey mapping exercise. So like from this point forward, all we did is we went in and we did workshops to really understand what the journey was and to get those nuances. And so you can see we did some strategic journeys where we actually set up personas and things like that, but we talked about what channels are people using, where are they shopping, how is it different, you know? Like one thing, I'm just gonna go back to Argentina that's kind of interesting is they don't actually have, like people buy diapers at like the bodega consistently, and they have a relationship with the owner of the bodega. They don't go to Walmart and it's like literally, it's a real relationship they have, and we couldn't figure out how to make that beneficial to us, right? It's a completely different thing for, you know, other markets. We went to South Korea, we did some interesting work. They have actually since gone off in a different direction, but what we did do was we had a really good workshop with them, learned some very interesting things in terms of how they're much more directive, for lack of a better way to put it. I'm just going to leave it at that. They were like, this is what we're going to do. And I'm like, okay. We went to Israel. Israel is a very interesting market as well, and they incredibly passionate about CRM, which was really exciting. So when I talk about being in places where it was like, people were like, you know, we have 20% of an assistant brand manager doing CRM. In Israel, they all showed up. And I was like, holy crap, this is great. And they were all in on these workshops, right? And they were just all couldn't stop talking. And we really did some great work with them. And then they were off and running. And like, that's all they needed, right? We put in the tool also. But like from a strategy standpoint, because they were so passionate and they had all like come together and they already kind of had that fire, we just did the workshop from a strategy standpoint, made some suggestions, and they were gone. And it was amazing, right? And they're still going strong. When we went to Colombia is interesting. This actually cracks me up, but like, actually it doesn't. It's kind of awful. But we were talking about how to roll out this particular journey in Colombia, and they said, like they basically would say that we don't really start talking about it until like 9 months, or like 8, 9 months, and kind of keep it under wraps. And I was like, that is, just like, my mouth is, right? But it's just the nature of, they tell their very close network, but they do not tell everybody else until that last mile. And so again, we had to shift that journey, right, and make it work for them. And they took the entire, everything that we did, including the tactical journey and the assets and all that. So it's just trying to flex with what these different markets needed was really key. We also went to Kenya. I'll tell you, Kenya is one of my favorite places. Very, very interesting workshopping experience. It took, you can imagine, like they weren't doing really CRM at all. They wanted to, but they weren't doing it at all. They were very heavily focused on media. So one of the things that was most interesting is we sat down and we set up this workshop with them, and we brought in all the marketing team, and they were all moms. There wasn't a single person that wasn't a mom in that room. and they all had opinions, and they were all engaged, and they all were like talking over each other, and they're so engaged. We went into the night. Like, I kid you not, they didn't want to stop talking and sharing experiences and then figuring out how to put those experiences into a journey that they could then share. And I was like, this is amazing. So we go like, first trimester, what do you guys do? And there I am, like writing away. I'm like, oh, that's great, that's great. What, how do you do that? Get to second trimester, I'm starting to fill out, and everybody's still excited. I'm writing. And then I get to third trimester, and I said, okay, what do you guys do on third trimester? And the whole room goes quiet. And I was like, what do you guys do in third trimester? And they go, we pray. And I was like, holy. I'm not sure how to communicate that, right? But we'll figure it out. But that's a really big difference, right? There's a really high infant and mother mortality rate still in Kenya. So they pulled back from all of this sharing and, all that until after the baby is born. And then they have like a baby shower then, because everybody's safe, and they bring everybody home. And I was like, damn, pardon my French. But that was powerful, right? And then you go to like Brazil. And Brazil is interesting in another way. And again, we have to modify and test all these things every time we make a tweak. But Brazil was really interesting. It's Portuguese. Just annoying because everybody else is Spanish. But whatever. So, but they, when they actually get, so again, we're talking about diapers here, right? So we can start talking to moms in Brazil anytime, right? And they would engage to some degree, and they get more and more engaged as they go along, which is what we usually expect. But when it comes to getting diapers into the home, they do it almost in one fell swoop, which is the weirdest thing. And it took me a while to get my head around this. They have a baby shower, and they call it a diaper shower. And they literally get in probably most of the first year's worth of diapers into the home in the shower. It's got to be chaos. I have no idea where they keep them, right? But we had to think about, how are we going to communicate, It doesn't make sense to run a promotion after they've had their baby shower and say, buy more diapers. They're not going to do it for like 6-8 months. So we had to like really think through that. But it's really interesting, and you don't know those things until you go into the market and you talk to folks and you really understand what the different nuances are. But the good news is, a lot of it that we did in the first, in Australia, we were able to lift and shift and kind of use different parts and pieces of it throughout this whole experience. And now we're in over 50 markets. Huggies has got a good footprint there. They have a strong foundation. We also been able to like codify things into like a playbook, right? So that now we actually have ways to just spread the word more easily. And so I don't have to go in and tell everybody how to do it. I can just say, here's a playbook. Let me know what your questions are, or let's talk afterwards. So this whole idea of, testing and learning our way through this was incredibly educational, not only for just me as a CRM practitioner, but as a human being. I just thought it was really fascinating and really interesting. So this whole idea of like then building the capability. Now everybody's got email, great, right? But that doesn't stop, like CRM doesn't stop, right? We have to keep evolving and keep changing. Then we would go back in and we talk to them, okay, now that you actually have a strong acquisition and your first 6-8 months of engagement is locked in, we have to start thinking about reactivation, because you're going to start to get some drop off, right? What's that? Okay. I'll move faster, sorry. I can talk about this stuff. So strategies like win back, advocacy, those sorts of things, we definitely have gone back in and how to inform and educate around that. Capabilities, we've added in advertising. I call it still studio. I think it's inappropriate, but apparently. But started using data in different ways to support their media. Of course, bringing in things like send time optimization, path optimizer, those sorts of things. But again, it's still test it in one market and then codify it and roll it out. Now we've gone on past email in the last 2 years, and we're talking a lot about SMS, WhatsApp, things like that. How can we use those different tools? And then in-app push in some cases. And then we started moving to other brands. So we nailed Huggies. How can we take that and turn it into a Kleenex experience? Just do the same thing all over again, but now we're smarter, now we're faster, right? We can do it more cost effective. Real quick. So just to give you a sense of, the highs and the lows of it, We're now in 50 markets, which is a pretty good, consistent practice, right? We're no longer trying to just land. We're now trying to get everybody to expand more and to get better. Now we have actually teams in place, not just a person or a fraction of a person. We have people who actually have strong expertise that are asking me challenging questions now, which is great. But in general, we've seen initially a 50% increase in engagement. Australia was easy. But generally speaking, we were able to increase the engagement rates quite significantly, keep them at or above benchmark. My favorite thing, which is we have consistently high ROI for email, and that's proved out in all the studies versus things like media. We have the one platform that we're managing against, and we have, like I said, 4 very capable regional teams that are now spreading the gospel as well. So we're in a pretty good spot. So that's the story I really wanted to share. I know it's a little bit different than some of the other ones, but it's been a really interesting and rich experience, and hopefully there's some nuggets of wisdom in there that might help you guys if you ever decide to do something similar.
Woo! Rebecca, that was awesome. I think I have goosebumps all over my body from that example that you talked about of how moms just differ by different countries. I think we have time for one question. Who's going to be the lucky participant? Ryan, I'm looking at you. There we go.
Let me guess, what's the roadmap?
Yeah. Can I get that in a PDF, please? A lot of companies are hesitant to change their brand and adapt that. What was that process like for the company to go into these different companies and have to adapt to local tradition to really morph the core of who Huggies is into a local market?
Well, actually, that's funny. So we don't really. Like, the core of Huggies is Huggies, right? But we did have to clean it up a bit, as I mentioned. Like, some people were using different brand assets and things like that. So that was part of it. And to be honest with you, if you come in with something better than what they had, they basically grab it and run. So we did a nice rebranding for Huggies about 5 years ago, I think. And literally, they gobbled it up because it's really good. It's this whole idea of "we got you, baby," and they redid the logo, they redid everything, and they are really beginning to grab onto it and learn to work with it. So from our standpoint, it's really just trying to maintain that balance. But the key is you really have to bring them something better than what they've got, I would tell you. Mm-hmm.
All right. Rebecca, great job. Thank you so much. Great job.